T. Welcome to the Command Post. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. I, of course, am your Commander-in-Chief, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. Day one of OTAs took place. And look, it's OTAs, man. I want to get excited. I want to talk about all the things that, this means. But look, guys, it's OTAs. Off-season training activities. Really interesting versus important is what I really want to talk about, because we heard from about 6 players at the podium. Ron Rivera himself spoke as well, and there were some tidbits to take away from what he had to say. But more importantly, the players spoke, and the veterans were there this time. Remember, we had the minis with the rookies right after the draft. This time, the veterans were involved for the first time in OTAs. And again, look, the questions the media were asking, the players are like, look, we just got here. I don't know these guys. It's my first time seeing Carson. What do you want from me? What do you want me to tell you? You want something from me that I can't give you right now. And that's essentially how I feel about OTAs. Like, it's much to do about nothing. However, players spoke. And I do think there are some important things that can be taken from what they said versus some interesting things that people want to assume because the players are back on the practice field for the first time in the upcoming season. So again, most of what we can gain from OTAs is interesting. It's not important, but what was said by the players and Ron Rivera, I thought was important on day one of OTAs. So I want to speak about those things now. So let's start with head coach Ron Rivera. And some of the things that I thought he said that were interesting and maybe even important. So one of the things he talked about was running back by committee. He said that he did not single out Antonio Gibson as his clear-cut starter. He said it's going to be running back by committee. Interesting. We talked about Antonio Gibson's role potentially changing and Brian Robinson having a much bigger role than just your standard run-of-the-mill short yardage back. He wasn't just taking Peyton Barber's place on this roster. He was essentially coming in and being an extra guy that could touch the football anywhere from 7 to 10 times in any given game. And again, it could be one of those hot hand situations. Antonio Gibson gets off to a slow start. Washington goes 3 and out on the opening possession. They put in Brian Robinson, and he busts off a couple of big runs, and all of a sudden they stick with him. And Gibby only ends up with 7 carries and 2 catches for 9 total touches. And meanwhile, Brian Robinson gets 17 rushes and another 2 catches out of the backfield for a total of 19 touches. And it could be that way. And that's the way Ron Rivera is presenting it right now. I still think it's Gibby's job, and until otherwise notified, until he does something to alter that, or injuries or something like that interjects itself into that mix, I still think it's Gibby's job to lose. But Ron made it abundantly clear. And remember, when he had his most success in Carolina, it was a double-headed monster. They called it double trouble in Carolina with Jonathan Stewart and D'Angelo Williams. And we kind of had that with J.D. McKissick and Antonio Gibson, but maybe he's looking for a little bit more physicality. Brian Robinson's going to provide that, obviously, and ball security is something Ron continues to preach about. Robinson is really good at that as well. So we'll see. I still think it's Antonio Gibson's job, and we're going to get to a lot of that because Gibson was the first one to speak at the podium. There's a 42-minute press hit that came from day one of OTAs. And like I said, 6 to 7 different guys stepped up. Antonio Gibson, William Jackson III, Curtis Samuel, Jahan Dotson, Cole Holcomb. I mean, all of these guys spoke at the podium. So John Allen also spoke. So a lot of things to get to there. But let's talk about some important things from OTAs. And the first of which, Terry McLaurin was not there. Okay. Now, this is only important because it's a part of the process. And I only use this to bring up, I know you guys have Bleacher Report on your mobile devices as well. And so you probably saw the alert that said Terry McLaurin and the Washington Commanders are far apart on a new deal. Okay, duh. That's what you expect to hear. And I got a video that I'm gonna chop up from the podcast, a little excerpt that I'll chop up, and we'll talk about that. And I'll put that out along with my feelings on Daniel Snyder and him potentially being close to being ousted. All of those will be on a video that you'll be able to access. If it's not already out, it'll be out shortly after this video is out. So be on the lookout for that. If you haven't already seen it watching the podcast, I'll put that excerpt together so that you can have at that conversation that was had on Monday. Anyway, Terry not being there is interesting. It's not important. What is important is that a deal will get done. And I feel really confident about that. And I think Jonathan Allen really touched on a lot of what I want to say. So we'll save that for when Jonathan Allen comes up in terms of what he had to say when he stepped up to the podium after day one of OTAs. But what is important in terms of on the field was that of Daron Payne, who reported to OTAs, then got pissed off with his contract situation and left. So I don't know if this was planned on the part of Daron Payne to show up, to maybe get a little bit of clarity as to where he stood in terms of a new contract, and then to show that he was upset by leaving early and have it, play out that way. Or maybe he really wanted to show up, genuinely wanted to see where his contract negotiations were and how they felt about him. And if he didn't like what he heard, he was going to leave. Because again, if you're really looking for a new deal, OTAs isn't where you want to be. Again, I know sometimes people get bent out of shape about people not showing up, players not being at OTA and not being present. But at the end of the day, if you don't have a new deal and you want one, you want to stay away from any activities that may lead to you getting injured, because again, the team isn't going to do you a solid because you did them a solid by showing up at OTAs. They're not going to then return the favor if you get injured at OTAs and say, you know what, as a show of good faith, since you showed up at OTAs, we're going to give you a brand new contract. That's not how that works. So in the best interest of the player, you stay away. Doesn't make any sense for you to be there. Terry's not going to be there. It makes a ton of sense. But Daron Payne showing up and then leaving is very, very interesting and somewhat important, because if you've been following him on socials, he's been a little bit, hot under the collar. He's been a little bit pissed off about how things have gone this offseason with all the trade rumors and, Washington potentially moving on from him. I think he's starting to read the tea leaves and all of the innuendos that are floating around out there. I think it's starting to get to him, and he's starting to get upset. Feels, I think, underappreciated. And I think this is his crying out for, attention right now. Like, hey, so you guys are going to give Terry a new deal, but you're not going to give me a deal. You're going to give Jonathan Allen a new deal last year, but you don't think I'm good enough to get a deal. You know what? F y'all. So I think he's in his feelings right now, and this could be a problem. I'm not going to lie to you, because he's not happy. I think he has to come to the realization he's not getting a deal here, and that he should be playing his ass off for a new contract elsewhere. And the part that gets a little dicey, and this is why you really want to tread lightly if you're Washington, is because if he plays his ass off this year and explodes, because we know the dude is super talented, super durable, as my guy Derek B always likes to bring up, and super talented as well. If he somehow has one of those breakout contract seasons, and we see guys do this all the time, and then all of a sudden you're like, man, we want Daron back, he may not want to come back because he felt slighted. So you really want to tread lightly here if you're Washington, and kind of make him feel like, hey, just show us. If you want us to give you a contract, just show us. He that might not be good enough for him. He might to him he feels like, I've done everything you've asked me to do. I've been, one of the most durable players, not one of the most durable player on this defensive line. Everybody else has missed significant time except me. I've been the one guy you can count on week in and week out. I've produced at a relatively high level for you. I don't know what else you want from me. Where's my money? and they're like, yeah, we spent the number 13 overall pick on you, and we just don't feel like that's what we're getting from you. So I think there's a bit of a disconnect there. I think he's starting to get in his feelings, and he's got to understand where he is on the totem pole. You're not Terry. You're not Jonathan Allen. You're not viewed as a leader on this football team. You're not viewed as a blue chip player. You're a really good player and a key cog on this defense, but you're a guy that is replaceable right now. You have to show that you're irreplaceable right now. That's not the feeling I get from the front office, and so I think he's starting to feel like he's underappreciated. So that's something to keep an eye on, because that could turn into something a little bit later down the line. He may ultimately say, trade me. You feel this way about me, trade me. I don't want to be here. And we saw what Ron has done in the past when players have, pushed Ron up against the wall and essentially, made threats. That doesn't go over well with Ron, and generally something gets done relatively quick. I don't want to see anything knee-jerk happen here. So again, I don't want to jump to conclusions. It's just the first day of OTAs. This might have been his plan all along, just to see where negotiations were. They probably told him negotiations are nowhere, and then he got mad and he went home. We'll see. We'll see what happens with that situation. But if he's looking for a new deal, he had no business being at OTAs anyway. So that's interesting and important. The Daron Payne saga to be continued. Speaking of sagas and to be continued, there's a lot of things that were said at the podium that were interesting, and a couple of tidbits that were important from these players. And so I want to jump into that right now. We start, and we're going to try to go in order of the way these guys stepped up to the podium. And I may be off here on one or two guys and how they stepped up to the podium in the order that they did. But I know Gibby was first. So we'll start with Antonio Gibson. And, a lot of questions were thrown at him as to, the pick of Brian Robinson, what this means for his workload, and have they told him how he's going to be utilized. And they tried to get something out of Gibby that he just wasn't going to give them, which was what his usage rate is going to be and how he feels like. It's almost like they tried to pit him against Brian Robinson Jr. Like, oh, this guy's going to come take your job. How do you feel about that? And he's like, look, man, dude is big. He's physical. He looks the part. If he needs any help, I'm here. I think he's going to be a really good guy to fit in this running back room. As far as, running back by committee, they tried to throw that line from Ron Rivera in his face to see how he responded to that. He's like, look, man, I can only do what they allow me to do, whether they want me to be more of a pass catcher or they want to hand it to me, or, he's like, we got a bunch of backs. And he listed all the backs in the running back room. He did the Jay Gruden thing. I'm like, dude, only 3 of y'all are making the football team. You don't need to talk about Williams and, this guy and that guy. None of those guys are making the football team. But, barring some kind of catastrophe. Anyway, he pretty much said, look, I'm going to play whatever role that they want me to play, this season. And, if it's a reduced role, so be it. Whatever it is, I'm going to do what they ask me to do. All right. And I thought, so that was interesting, right? Nothing really important there. What was important was that Gibby lost weight. He's in better shape this offseason, and he felt like the weight started to take away from his explosiveness. He didn't necessarily link his weight to his injury issues, but he did say that he felt like having the weight off would make him a lot more spry, shifty, and explosive. So now that is important. If he thinks that losing weight is going to make him a better football player, I'm all for it. And I want to see what this lean and trim and fit Gibby looks like. And can this guy be the true difference maker that we've been looking for all along when we drafted him in the 3rd round out of Memphis back in 2020? So I'm excited about Gibby's physique in camp, and I want to see what it looks like. Hopefully he'll still be in the same shape that he's in right now, and come training camp time, and I'm anxious to see if that actually proves to be the difference maker. I've seen running backs get into tip-top shape and have their careers change. Le'Veon Bell is a prime example of that. Came in the league heavy, got into tremendous shape, I think in his 2nd or 3rd year, and took off from there. I want to see if Gibby may be able to have a similar trajectory with his career by getting into shape. So that was important to me. He also talked about his relationship with J.D. McKissick and, McKissick almost being gone. And he's like, he was so happy when he came back, like, get your ass back here. So that was funny. But all in all, Gibby was like, look, man, we've been here one day. I don't know what y'all want from me. I haven't really seen Brian Robinson. I don't know what Carson Wentz is all about yet. I mean, I just got here, man. All right. So I don't know what y'all looking for. So then you get to the next guy who stepped up to the podium, and that was John Allen. And look, love me some John Allen, man. He's clearly the leader of this team, and he's no nonsense. That's part of the reason we love him. He doesn't sugarcoat anything, and I thought he probably had some of the most important nuggets for us to chew on, and it had nothing to do with actual on the field stuff. It was more about his negotiations with the team last year, and in regards to Terry this year. He said he spoke to Terry, as all the players who have been here previous to this year have pretty much been in contact with Terry. He said that he told Terry, the one thing that he took away from the negotiations is it's a business, and you gotta try to not let it get personal. But he said it's so hard, and that's the thing that players generally don't take heed to, is they allow these negotiations to get personal. And they know it's a business. And you hear people say that all the time here. These players say it all the time. It's a business. It's a business. It's a business up until it starts to affect your livelihood. And now it becomes personal. And so it's easy to say it's a business when you're talking about it from someone else's perspective. Like, oh, it's Terry's contract. Yeah, it's a business, man. We know what it is. And Terry's not here. And we respect that. And we want Terry to get paid. It's a business when it's Terry's business, but when it's your business, it becomes personal. And he said, look, I left OTAs last year for a week. I showed up and then I left. I was pissed off because the contract negotiations weren't going the way that I thought they should have. And I left and I didn't come back. And it was because it got personal. He said it's the team's job to get the best deal for the team, and it's the player's job and the agent's job to get the best deal for the player. So, sometimes it can get rough. And I talked about that on the podcast. And again, that video will be out, so you can go ahead and consume that. But he said that, that's the thing he tried to convey to Terry, is like, try not to let it get personal, but it's hard because this is your livelihood. This contract, especially when you're not a first round pick, like Jonathan Allen was a first round pick. So he saw some real money in that first deal, but it's still not, life-changing money yet. Terry's a third-round pick. He hasn't seen real money yet, life-changing money yet. So this is a big effing deal for Terry McLaurin, because this is his opportunity to set his family up for life, and they never have to want for anything ever again. So this is a big deal, and it gets personal. So he did talk about that. He also talked about, I wasn't privy to this until he said it, no Chase Young, no Montez Sweat at these OTAs. Chase Young still rehabbing. Montez Sweat had some personal things going on. So neither one of those guys were there, which is interesting, maybe important. I don't know, because I'd like to think that everybody was there pretty much, with the exception of those two guys. But whatever the case may be, he did make mention of that. He also talked about the defensive line room and how it's different. There's no Matt Ioannidis, there's no Tim Settle, and he's like, pretty much since I got here, those two guys have been here the entire time, so them not being here was awkward. But he's like, again, it's a business, I understand it, but it did feel different. So, Jonathan Allen dropping a couple of gems on our melons in day one of OTAs. Curtis Samuel stepped up to the mic and just talked about him just feeling good and feeling healthy and ready to go. And he talked about, how last year really weighed on him mentally. And he lost confidence. He lost confidence not in his ability to play, but in his ability to stay healthy. He lost confidence in his ability to open up and run, fearing that he would get injured if he ran his fastest. So he talked about having to build that confidence back up. And a lot of times, y'all as fans don't understand the psychology. I talk about psychology. I was a psych major, and I talked about how there's a psychology to all of this. You hear the term sports psychologist, and almost every team has one. And there's a real psychology to sports and confidence and things of that nature. And you can lose your confidence and not get it back, and it affects you as a player. If you've played sports, you know how confidence can be fleeting. So he talked about not confidence in his ability to catch or run, but his confidence to stay healthy when opening up and running his fastest. He didn't have confidence that he could do that and stay healthy at the same time without, re-aggravating the groin or pulling a hamstring. So he had to actually get healthy and then actually have to do reps over and over again to show himself that he could go out on the field, run his fastest, stop, cut, change directions, and nothing would go wrong. So he's kind of rebuilt himself back from scratch. He feels really good, and he's ready to really help this team compete. So he talked about the amount of talent, and he said, look, there's enough footballs to go around. You can never have enough offensive weapons. When he was asked about Jahan Dotson's arrival, and he's like, look, I'll do anything that they ask me to do. Hand me the ball, throw me the ball. He says, anytime I touch the football, I feel like I can help this team in a tremendous way. So, any way they want to get it to me, I'm all for it. So it was good to hear from Curtis Samuel. Never, ever trust a man with two first names. And it's good to hear that he is 100% healthy. Hopefully, it stays that way. We also heard from first-round pick Jahan Dotson, and he talked about, just acclimating himself to the playbook. He said that's the toughest thing. He's like, look, we ran all of these same kind of plays and concepts at Penn State. It was just called something else. He's like, it's like speaking English your entire life and then now having to speak Spanish. You have to learn all of this stuff. And he's like, I'm still adjusting. He said, but we got a great room I've been able to lean on. And then he rattled off all of the receivers, not named Terry McLaurin. He said he has not spoken to Terry yet since being drafted, but he has been in contact with the rest of the guys in that wide receiver room, like Curtis Samuel, Cam Sims, and he even mentioned De'Ami Brown as a guy that he's leaned on for help in this process to this point. So it sounds like everything's going well. He said he's starting to build a rapport with Carson Wentz. A lot of Carson Wentz questions, and these guys are like, look, I don't really know what you want from me. Like, I've literally been out here with Carson a day, and, I don't really know what you want me to say about Carson Wentz, what he's going to bring to the table. One thing that Jonathan Allen said was, look, he's going to help us push the ball down the field. He's got a big arm. It's live. It might have been William Jackson III that actually said that. But one of those guys said that, look, the one thing we can see right away is that he's going to push the football down the field. He's got a live arm. So I think that's, again, we've seen so many teammates and coaching staff members take shots at Taylor Heineke's arm strength without actually saying his name. So, again, the arm strength is a big thing, and Wentz definitely brings that to the table. But Dotson said, look, I'm back here fielding punts, and that's important, okay? You want to talk about interesting verse? That's important because, again, we don't know what they're going to do with punt return right now. Again, Alex Erickson, we're all assuming is going to fill that DeAndre Carter role for us, but there are no guarantees in this thing. And if Dotson can do it and they feel confident with him back there and still handling his wide receiver duties, then so be it. I still am convinced that they're not going to allow him to get back there, maybe once or twice, but they're not going to let him do that full time. He's just too important to the offense. I can't see them risking him back there as a punt returner. But we will see. He said, look, I just want to touch the ball in any way, shape, form. So if they put me back there on punts, I'm all for it. He says he wants to do it, but just because you want to do it doesn't mean you are going to do it. I don't think they're going to allow him to do it, but we will see. I thought that was probably the biggest, takeaway from what he had to say was that he was fielding punts. It's OTAs, okay? I get it, but still, That's a big question. It was a big question last year about who's going to field punts, return kickoffs. It's a big question again this year. So well, we'll see what happens. But Jahan Dotson fielding punts, something to store away in the memory bank. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying. I'm just saying. We also heard from Cole Holcomb. Now, Holcomb is going to be the middle linebacker in the upcoming season. I think he's trying to convey to everyone. I think he's getting really annoyed by having to say this multiple times. I had the green dot all last season, okay? This green dot isn't a new thing for me. I had the green dot. My problem last year was it wasn't until the Green Bay game where they actually moved me to middle linebacker so I could communicate with the entire defense and not have to run around like a chicken with my head cut off from one side of the field to the other. He's like, once they put me in the middle, it was easier to communicate, get everybody on the same page. He says, that's something I'm continuing to work on because he's like, I'm more of a guy that likes to pull people to the side and have conversations with them. I'm not one of those, yelling, boisterous guys, around others. But, when you're, the mic backer and you got the green dot, you have to communicate, and you have to yell and you have to get everybody on the same page. And so he said he's still continuing to work at that, but he is excited for the opportunity, and I think he's ready for this opportunity. I think a lot of y'all are asleep on Cole Holcomb, and I think he's ready to wake y'all up. But I think a lot of y'all are asleep on his ability to play middle linebacker. I think you guys were just fixated on getting a new middle linebacker, and you just overlooked the fact that Cole Holcomb, the guy that we may need, is sitting right here. And he talked about Jamin Davis being more comfortable. He can already see Jamin Davis being more comfortable. He said, first of all, Jamin Davis is more naturally an outside backer anyway, so he's more comfortable just doing that. And similar to what Cole said about playing linebacker for this team last year, he's like, look, they had me playing all three positions. I needed to know all three positions. It's a lot harder to focus in and hone in on one particular position when they got you learning all three of them. Same thing with Jamin Davis, and he was a rookie, and Cole was a third-year guy last year. So, and that was still a problem for him. Whereas he's like, look, I just got to learn the mic this year. And I know all of the positions. I've been in this defense now going on my third year, so I know what to expect. But, now I can just hone in and focus on just being a mic backer. I don't have to worry about playing other linebacker positions. So Jamin Davis, it's the same thing for him. Now he doesn't have to worry about playing, middle linebacker or this, that, and the third. He can just focus on being a weak side backer, and I think that's going to benefit him in the long run. So he's like a lot less thinking, a lot more flying around and playing. And so I think that's important that he's more comfortable, and Jamin Davis seems to be a lot more comfortable in year number 2. And then finally, we heard from William Jackson III. Will Jack changed his jersey number, in case you guys were not aware. He went from 23 last year to number 3, which is his college number, this year. So, D-Hop had 3 last year, and then you can't change your jersey number in season. So he was dying, chomping at the bit to get 3 once D-Hop was released. So now he's got the green light to get it. He said he is light years better with this team defensively. And I think the most important thing that he said was not about, and he said a lot. William Jackson III said a lot. Will Jack kind of gave us insight as to some of the issues last year. And we knew it, but it's great to hear it, from him, from the source, the horse's mouth, if you will. But I think the most important thing he said is that as a group defensively, they are a lot tighter. He's like, we playing golf together, we going out, we bowling together, we spending more time with each other. And I think a lot of you guys out there as fans underrate what continuity means for a team. The closer you are off the field, the closer you are on the field. The more likely you are to know what you're going to get from the guy next to you. When you are close to that guy off the field, when you're friends, you're going to be in sync on the field, okay? Like, if you've got a best friend, then there's like an unwritten language, that things that don't even need to be said. And that person, if they've known you long enough and they know how you operate, you don't have to say a word. They know exactly what you're going to do or what you're going to say in that situation. That's what happens when there's a rapport off the field. And they're starting to build that. It was hard to have that last year with COVID. They weren't even in OTAs last year. They were doing everything virtually. It was hard to hang out. And then, William Jackson III being a brand new member of the team last year, it's hard to build those relationships when you're not seeing these guys every day, but other than on a computer. So it's a lot different now. And he talked about that camaraderie, and I think that's going to bode well for this defense on the field. But he talked about his struggles last year, and he said, look, I didn't really start to turn my season around until the Tampa Bay game. That's when I really got comfortable. We've talked about this. William Jackson III finished the season strong. Like, it was awfully quiet on his side of the football field, back into the season, which is coincidentally enough when the defense started to turn things around. It was kind of, he was really a microcosm of the defense as a whole. We struggled early. You figured some things out. Guys got on one accord, and they played better down the stretch. And he was one of the players that played much better down the stretch. So he talked about, the biggest issue for him and hurdle was we played a lot of zone, and he was a man cover corner in Cincinnati, and at Houston, he didn't play a lot of zone, so he wasn't really familiar with some of the techniques and some of the things they were asking him to do. He's like, look, I was a totally different player the first half of the season, man. He's like, I even hated watching film because I was so terrible. I didn't even know the dude I was watching. But he's like, I got comfortable. And again, here's that confidence, and I talk about confidence all the time, which is why the first 2-3 games of the season is huge. Why? Because they could be confidence builders, right? That's why those first 3 games have a chance to be massive, because if you win the first 2 games, confidence it can be fleeting, but it can also be a bully and a monster. If you grow that confidence and it continues to swell, that's how the Carolina Panthers in 2015 went 15-1 and went all the way to the Super Bowl. That team wasn't super talented. It wasn't one of the best teams we had ever seen to go 15-1. But you know what it was? A team that gained confidence. It continued to swell. You had an MVP quarterback in Cam Newton playing his ass off, but that whole team was playing with an abundance of confidence. Where did they get the confidence from? Winning games early in the season, and it just continued to swell. So confidence is big, and William Jackson III talked about gaining that confidence the second half of the season last year. It's spilling over to this year, and he says he feels great, and he thinks he's ready to have a massive season for the Commanders. So I thought that a lot of what was said at the podium were really good tidbits, interesting comments, and we'll see what happens with the rest of the OTAs. Hopefully we'll hear from Carson Wentz. Hopefully we'll hear from a couple more guys that are interesting players, and see where this thing goes. But OTAs on the field, what you're hearing, like, don't read too much into that. I'm more interested in what is being said by coaching staff members and players, less about what's going on the field. It's OTAs, more about what's being said while they're at OTAs. That's what I'm going to focus in on. So that's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, and your update on the OTAs, the first time the veterans have shown up. And 2 more days of OTAs. We'll see if anything else of note is said or done. We'll keep our eye on the Daron Payne situation. That is a interesting dynamic there, and one to keep an eye on. Terry's situation, I firmly believe this. I've already said he's going to get a deal, and it's going to be closer towards training camp. Deadline spur action, that's when things will get done, and I think Terry will be a Commander for a very long time. But I am a Washington fan, etched in burgundy and gold. My Washington spirit will never die. Washington spirit will never fold. Until we meet again, post up, take command. Again, I'll have that other video out. If it's not already out, it'll be out shortly. And again, we'll be live Thursday night for the Commander Post, or the Command Post Live. Look forward to chopping it up with you guys then, as well as we head into Memorial Day weekend. Until then, you guys take care. Have a good one.
LouieTeeNetwork.